Welcome back. I'm back with Representative Ocasio-Cortez. I want to ask you about Joe Biden. You have said you will be voting for Joe Biden, but you have yet to endorse him. Your teams have talked. He doesn't actually seem to be moving in your direction at all right now. Are there 2 or 3 things that he could commit to out of the potential galaxy of them where you would be surprised enough to say, okay, didn't see that coming, you have my endorsement now?
Probably healthcare, climate change, and I mean, the third is really tough. You know, it could be immigration, it could be reining in Wall Street, it could be stopping money in politics, movement on Puerto Rico. You know, I think the third one, there's a lot, but in terms of also just getting past the post, you know, I'm not here to needle, and I'm not here to just try to score a point, as I've said before. I think these are real concessions that need to be made in order for us to win in November. To have, you know, if you actually look at the history of who wins these elections, the Democrat who's gotten the nomination has not been able to win in November without youth support in a long time. And right now, where I think we're at is we have a nominee that does not have very large youth support, at least it's not particularly enthusiastic, has not performed well with Latino electorates in key states like Arizona, Colorado, key swing states that we need to get to 270. And so I think that these are changes that need to be made in order for us to win. I'm really concerned. And, you know, I'm really kind of tired of people looking back at 2016 and again hectoring people for staying home without us being introspective about the fact that we had 2 historically unpopular candidates. You know, people can go into why, and maybe this shouldn't have been, this, that, and the other. Fact of the matter is, 2 historically unpopular candidates, that was an overwhelmingly deflating election for a lot of people. And without introspection about why that was or what changes need to be made, if we try to run the 2016 playbook all over again, we are taking an enormous, enormous risk. And so, again, this is not about scoring a point. This is about making necessary changes so that Donald Trump does not get reelected.
This is about the soul of the United States of America.
When Joe Biden says to wealthy donors, under me, nothing would fundamentally change, do you think he, in his heart, wants the America you want, but he just has a different view of what's possible? Or do you think fundamentally he does not want America to change in the ways that you want it to change?
I do not know what is in Joe Biden's, you know, head, or in, I don't, you know what's in his heart. You know, I know he wants what is good for people, but also, I also understand that, you know, the role that he has historically played in the Senate and as vice president and throughout his entire career has been this idea of kind of this American norm. And I think that's a lot of what the candidacy is staked on, is like norms and civility and respectability. And just normal was not working for a lot of us. Normal does not work for millennials, it doesn't work for people of color, it doesn't work for any of that. And so I think, you know, what it does work for, what, you know, going back to normal does work for, are affluent suburban voters that both parties are very much fighting over.
Can we hear it for all our NYCHA residents that came down here today? Can we hear it for our public housing advocates that came down here today? Can we hear it for our intersectional environmental justice champions who came down here to Washington, D.C. to fight for our future and reject the paradigm that environmental justice must come at the cost of our jobs or our economic well-being? We know that's not true.
I think it's really important that that we push, because I don't think we can just trust that things are going to move in a progressive direction because the clock is ticking. We have to fight for it. And fighting for things often means that you get labeled as radical and a firebrand and difficult and inconvenient and not a team player. because team players buckle up and saddle in and they stay quiet and they don't make people uncomfortable. And, you know, there's something to be said for that, but that's never been who I am.
A lot of people watching this are locked at home with only some content on TV or an internet connection if they're lucky. Can you recommend some of the artists and writers out there that people can be watching and reading in this time who have helped you and who you think are at the vanguard of shifting the consciousness of this country right now?
You know, what we need to do, an act of rebellion, is engaging in the creation of art. And so whether it's reading bell hooks, whether it's listening to radical music, whether it's reading theory, reading about the history of the Black Panthers and their establishment of mutual aid. You know, I think there's a lot that we could be doing right now, but ultimately, I think when we talk about this idea of reopening society, you know, only in America does the president, when the president tweets about liberation, does he mean go back to work? When we, you know, have this discussion about going back or reopening, I think a lot of people should just say, no, we're not going back to that. We're not going back to working 70-hour weeks just so that we could put food on the table and not even feel any sort of semblance of security in our lives. And, you know, I think that is the most important conversation we can have. And I think it's going to take reading a lot of folks and indulging in poetry. I think it's going to require indulging in ourselves, in our history, in our culture. I think we need to read about coal miner rebellions in the early 1900s. I think we need to read about abolition work. I think we need to read The Warmth of Other Suns. I think we need to read so much to learn about ourselves, because the one thing that America does not do and our education does not do is we do not do a good job of teaching Americans about America.
Well, I want to thank you. You know, the reason I wanted to have you on as our first guest on this show is about challenging power, and so that's kind of an obvious connection. But we also talked about wanting to make this show a space where we actually listen and role model the kind of listening that is actually absent from our culture in so many respects. And you are not a talking point machine. You actually listen to questions and think while you're in the moment, and that's evident today. And just want to thank you so much for being our first guest, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
And we'll be right back.